Hello my VDV dropping friends. Today we are looking at a mod for Hearts of Iron 4 called Across the Dniepr. It plays during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, but it's also possible to pick 2014 as the starting date. And honestly, that already tells you everything about the vibe of this mod. There's no peace or buildup. No, let me industrialize for 5 years. No. You spawn in and the situation is already on fire. So, you load in, you pick a country, you zoom in on the map, and for about 10 seconds you feel confident. You're like, yeah, I've played Hearts of Iron 4. I know how this works. And then the game gently taps you on the shoulder and says, cool, now manage modern warfare, logistics, politics and an active frontline at the same time. The depth of this mod is quite ridiculous. This isn't just a reskin, it introduces new economic systems, new ideologies, tech tweaks, and a reworked interface that makes everything look clean while quietly hiding the fact that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You'll open a menu to check one thing and suddenly you are 3 tabs deep adjusting something called economic stability modifiers, wondering when your life became this complicated. It's like doing taxes, except the penalty for mistakes is losing the war instead of money. But what makes it even better, or worse depending on your mental stability, is how intense and personal the gameplay feels. The map is more focused, the conflict more direct, and every decision feels immediate. There's no hiding behind a massive global war. It's just you and your opponent and the constant realization that you probably made a decision somewhere about 2 hours ago that is now unfolding in real time. A huge part of the gameplay revolves around frontline management and positioning, much more than in vanilla Hearts of Iron. The front is tighter, more concentrated, and every tile matters for you. Rivers, cities, and supply hubs become critical choke points. You're not just drawing a big battle line and pressing go. You're constantly adjusting units, plugging gaps in the hole, and trying to avoid getting encircled, which we all know how this works. The Dnieper River itself often becomes a natural defensive line, and controlling crossings or losing them can decide the entire war. Another major focus is logistics and supply, and this is where the mod really becomes brutal. In vanilla Hearts of Iron 4, supply is important, but you can sometimes ignore it and still win the battle. Here, you absolutely cannot. If your railway hubs or infrastructure aren't working to your standard, the army just stops functioning. Units run out of equipment, fuel disappears, and suddenly your strong army becomes useless. A lot of gameplay ends up about building and protecting supply lines, just as much as fighting the enemy. You'll often find yourself pausing, not to plan an attack, but to figure out why half your army is starving. Then of course, there's the focus trees. We can't have a talk about Hearts of Iron 4 without the focus trees, of course. And the focus trees in Across the Dniepr are honestly one of the biggest reasons the mod feels so different, and also one of the main ways it quietly ruins your plans while pretending to help you. Instead of the classic Hearts of Iron 4 style where your focus tree is basically a pick industry, pick army and then start war, here the trees are much more political, reactive and story driven. They're not just bonuses, they're basically your entire strategy, your timeline and sometimes even your downfall. For major countries like Russia and Ukraine, the focus trees are quite large and split into multiple directions. On the Russian side, for example, you don't just prepare for war, you actually go through the build-up to it. There are branches that simulate the political and military lead-up to the 2022 invasion, but also alternative history paths, where things can go completely off the rails, including scenarios like internal instability or even a civil war if things spiral badly. So instead of a fixed outcome, the tree lets you decide whether Russia becomes stronger or collapses internally. On the other side, there's Ukraine's focus tree, which feels very different. It's more defensive and survival focused, especially early on. A lot of your focuses revolve around stabilizing the country and dealing with internal political issues and preparing for or responding to the conflict in regions like the Donbass. It gives you this constant feeling that you're trying to hold everything together with duct tape, while someone is actively trying to break it. Later on, the tree can branch into rebuilding, counterattacks, or shifting political direction, depending on how well or how badly you play. And what makes this interesting is that these trees are not just linear, they often branch into alternative history paths, meaning you're not locked into what happened in real life. You can push countries into completely different political directions and create unexpected alliances or trigger events that can change the entire course of the game. One playthrough might feel grounded and realistic, while another one turns into borderline chaos. And also there's not just these big countries like Russia and Ukraine. You would expect that they have a focus tree. No, there's also content for smaller countries like Belarus, which has its own unique paths, including things like revolution scenarios that can completely reshape the region. This adds a lot of replayability, because even when playing a minor nation, this doesn't feel like just sitting on the sidelines. You can actually influence the bigger conflict. And unlike in vanilla Hearts of Iron 4, where the late game can sometimes feel like a victory lap once you've won the big war, here the endgame rarely feels comfortable. Even if you're winning, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like you are barely holding things together while everything threatens to collapse at any moment. The war doesn't just end because you pushed far enough, it drags on and evolves and forces you to adapt constantly to it. If you're playing as a major power like Russia, the endgame often becomes a test of sustainability. Early aggressions might get you gains, but the late game you're dealing with long supply lines and economic strains, and the consequences of a prolonged warfare. Your army might still be strong, yes, but your resources, manpower and stability start to fall apart. The gameplay shifts from advance and conquer to can I actually maintain what I've taken without everything collapsing around me. It's less about expansion and more about survival at scale. Then there's Ukraine, for the endgame feels completely different for them, but just as intense. If you manage to survive the early and mid-game pushes, the late game can turn into a slow and grinding push to reclaim territory and stabilize the country, but even then, it's not easy. You're often fighting a war of attrition, where every push costs massive amounts of equipment, manpower and time. The satisfaction comes from slowly turning the tide, but it never feels guaranteed. One mistake can do hours of your progress. But this marks the end of my little showcase of this mod. It's a very cool mod, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely one of my favorite Hearts of Iron 4 mods. I hope you enjoyed this little rant video, this little ramble video, and I hope I see you in my next video. Bye!